The counter can be used anytime you need to keep count of something. Let's look at the user prefs. Auto hide and reset makes it so that as soon as the target count is reached, the count display will hide and the count will reset. Counter size defines the size of the counter's background. Text size determines how large or small the counter font size is. Show count will make it so that the current count is displayed on screen. Start count determines where the counter will start. Target count defines the count that you want to reach. It can be higher or lower than the start count. Next are the events. Count increased happens anytime the counting increases. Count decreased happens anytime the counting decreases. Target count reached happens anytime the counting is complete. Counter reset happens anytime the counting is reset. Before I give you a demo, let's look at the UI screen position script. This script allows us to adjust the position of the counter on the screen. Pivot and anchor location determines where the counter's object pivot is and where it will be anchored. The default option is top center. That means the counter's pivot point will be at the top center of the counter. It also means that the pivot point will be anchored to the top center of the screen. If we choose the option that says top left, then the counter's pivot point would be at the top left corner of the counter, and it would be anchored or positioned at the top left corner of the screen. The next option allows you to set the distance from anchor. With the pivot and anchor set to top center, the counter would be positioned at the top center of the screen. A positive Y value for the distance from anchor will move the counter downward, putting more distance in between the pivot point and the anchor point. A positive X value would move it to the right, and a negative X value would move it to the left. Let me give you a demonstration now. I'll go ahead and drop a counter into my scene, and I'll make sure to check the show count. I'll leave everything else as they are. The count won't show on the screen unless we tell it to, so I'll use an initializer to make it show up at the start of the game. This will also make it easier to make adjustments, since we'll be able to see it. You can find the initializer in the Utilities folder. I'll drop one into my scene and expand the initialized event. I'll drag in the counter and tell it to show counter. Now, when the game starts, the counter will be displayed. I'll go ahead and click the play button to see how it looks. It should be okay with the default settings, but we can change it if we need to. The initializer should tell it to show itself when it starts. You can see that the counter is anchored to the top center of the screen. If I want to move it down, in other words, move it farther away from where it's anchored, I can go back into the inspector and increase the Y value for distance from anchor. I'll change it to 20. Next, we need something to change the count. Let's use a button for this. I'll navigate to the Buttons and Levers folder and drag a button into my scene. I'll rotate it so that it's sitting on the ground. I'll also move it so that it's not right underneath my character. Once I have moved it out of the way of my character, I'll expand the triggered on-off event and then drag in the counter. I'll tell it to increase our count by 1. Let's test it out.